Hi everyone, now we are back today with another Volkswagen review, but this time it's not the ID.5, it's the Taigo, which, if you see this back end bit of it here, is effectively a swoopier version of the T-Cross. Or is it a bit more than that? Well, I think we should go take it for a drive and see what this Taigo has to offer. I've driven out onto this section of B Road near Volkswagen's media launch event, and the road is very, very rough. So we've really got to test this car in a very British way straight away. Rough B roads. And it is a bit jiggly, I'll be honest with you. It's not firm, it's quite cushioned over the bigger stuff. There's a pitter-patter to the suspension. And I think that's because, like all of these crossover models now, they're a bit taller, they've got bigger wheels, a bit heavier. So there's a bit more detail coming through the floor of the car when it comes to the ride. But actually, otherwise, it feels extremely familiar. It's as you would expect, very Golf-like, very Polo-like in the way it seems to feel on the road. It doesn't feel any bigger than those cars. It's a bit taller, of course, but fundamentally the footprint is pretty close. And it means that when you get into these cars, you don't really think about what you're doing, and that's a good thing. I actually prefer the infotainment system and the way you operate the controls in these models than I do in the ID models. The electric cars are deliberately slightly different inside, and I think they're just a bit more complicated. I think this having more conventional switchgear, having little controls down here for your heating, which firstly are illuminated at night so you can see what you're doing, unlike the ID models, and secondly, just a slightly simpler in operation. They're still touch-sensitive slidey controls, which aren't my favorite, but they're a lot easier to use. And then just having better buttons on the steering wheel. These are proper buttons rather than the haptic or touch-sensitive feedback stuff you get on other cars, and same for all the doors and everything. Enough of all the boring stuff. Right, this particular car is an R-Line model, so it's a bit sportier in its appearance. It has the turbocharged 3-cylinder 1-litre engine, and it has 110 horsepower, so, well, it's not quick at all, is it? It's just over 10 seconds to 62 miles per hour, but I can tell you straight away it has plenty of torque. 200 Newton meters is what it says on paper. The manual gearbox in this car as well, it's the 6-speed as I mentioned, which means you've got a good selection of ratios to play with. I've now got it in 5th and I'm only doing 50 miles per hour. We're doing 2,500 revs and we're going up a hill, and I'm about half throttle, half power, and I'm accelerating gradually. I mean, this is plenty nippy enough for what this car is designed to do. What about the way it steers around corners? I mean, there's absolutely no steering feel. Brake pedal regulation is typically Volkswagen. It's quite reactive. A very small amount of brake pressure is needed to actually really start introducing some deceleration. So it means it's an effortless driving experience. It means you can pretty much drive with your fingertips and your tippy toes. But for those of us looking for a bit more sensation and a bit more if you were to somehow believe the marketing and think that the R-Line is going to offer you some kind of engagement, well, it's not. It's a very muted experience of driving. But for the person who buys this car, the target buyer of this car, that's probably bang on. Now, you do actually get drive modes in this car. It doesn't have adaptive dampers, it doesn't have adjustable suspension, but you can cycle through Eco, Normal and Sport, and then there's an individual mode as well. Let me click it into Sport, just to feel how it changes some of the settings. Sharpens up the accelerator, predictable. I can't really tell anything else that's going to change. There's no difference in engine tone. It's very quiet, the engine. It's a nice and silent motor, again, appropriate for this type of car. I think you just get a bit of a sharper accelerator response, really. Let's take it out of that mode, shall we? You also get an individual mode, which if I click into it now, allows you to adjust basically the steering weight itself. And I mean, it's kind of pointless in this car. As I said, there's not really any steering feel, so you're just adding to your workload, really. And you can obviously speed up the accelerator's response, and then you can tweak things like the cruise control, how reactive it is. But fundamentally, this is a car you're probably going to stick in normal mode, or at most eco mode, if you want to drive especially slowly. Although in truth, you probably won't need to stick it in eco mode, because this 1-litre engine, which we know from several other Volkswagen models, is a super efficient motor actually. I mean, Volkswagen claims over 45 miles per gallon combined, and I mean, I've seen over 50 in models when I've been cruising admittedly quite slowly on the motorway and traffic, but this is clearly a very efficient petrol engine. It gives you kind of the best of both worlds. It means you've got diesel-like efficiency if you drive sensibly, but then you've got a petrol motor, which obviously all of us nowadays are buying. If we haven't gone fully electric, most people are buying petrol. All right, but what is it like on the open road? We're just coming out of a village now. Picks up to the average speed limit, no problems whatsoever, into 6th. This is clearly a car designed to be simple and calm to drive with no frills, but come on, that's what this class is all about, isn't it? All right, so Taigo, what do I think? Yeah, I liked it. Drives all right, it's honest. It's an R-line model, not a proper R model, which means it doesn't attempt to lure you into thinking it's a sporty model. It's got 110 horsepower, of course it's not. It's just a jacked up hatchback with a bit of a swept-back roofline. But, I mean, it still gives you a pretty good offering. The interior in this car is, as I said earlier, quite nice, and you've got good space. Because the seats are a bit higher, you can tuck your toes under here, bit of good room up here. Good room up here, actually really good room above me, actually. I'm actually surprised about how much room there is. There's a bit of an elevation at this back part of the roof here. So, good room in the back. Of course, you know, the middle seat's going to be a bit more cramped, but still totally fine. I think this is a fair and honest offering, and I can see families, small families with kids, really finding this appealing, even with that swoopy boot roofline. It does obviously compromise a little bit of room in the back, but not much. I mean, who really loads their cars up to the top here? Not many people. You've still got the same space in here. This is easily going to swallow a big suitcase here, or a couple of smaller ones. And then you've got smaller sections down here and a bit of underfloor storage, which in this car actually has a spare wheel in it. You don't see that very often. If you took that out, obviously you get a bit more room as well. So I think overall, as a car that costs just under 29K, well, I think it's just over 29K actually in basic, and this car as it sits here is just over 32K. All right. Not the cheapest thing on the market, but I can see the appeal of these models, and they sell like hotcakes. They honestly do. And I think with this Taigo's rear end, that fancy design, slightly fancier design, I can see why people are going to want to buy it. Oh, come on, I would absolutely much prefer to have a Golf. I'd go for a Golf R. But if you must have a crossover with a swoopy roofline, you're not going to go wrong with the Taigo, I think. If you enjoyed the video, do like it, and of course subscribe to the channel. We'll be testing more cars like this, but also a lot more fun cars as well. See you very soon.